The recording studio was supposed to be empty that night, but at 3 a.m., neighbors heard Freddie Mercury's voice echoing through the walls, singing a song that would never see the light of day. What they didn't know was that this wasn't just another recording session. This was Freddie's final goodbye to the world, captured in a way that would leave everyone who discovered it absolutely speechless. November 1991. Mountain Studios in Montreux, Switzerland. The same place where Queen had created some of their greatest masterpieces. But tonight, something was different. The usual energy, the laughter, the creative chaos that followed the band everywhere. It was all replaced by an eerie silence. Freddie had specifically chosen this night. He'd sent his bandmates away, told the staff to go home early, and made sure he was completely alone. Roger Taylor later described it as the night Freddie became a ghost before he actually became one. But what happened next would shock everyone who thought they knew the real Freddie Mercury. The answer lies in a tape that wouldn't be discovered until 6 months after his death. A tape that contained not just music, but Freddie's most intimate confessions, his deepest fears, and a message that would shatter the hearts of millions around the world. Earlier that day, Freddie had visited his doctor in Geneva. The news wasn't good. It was never good anymore. His T-cell count had dropped to dangerous levels, and the medications that had been keeping him stable were losing their effectiveness. Dr. Gordon Atkinson later recalled that Freddie sat in complete silence for 10 minutes after receiving the results. Then, suddenly, he stood up, adjusted his mustache in the mirror, and said something that chilled the doctor to the bone. "I think it's time I wrote my real farewell." Nobody understood what he meant. Not his partner Jim Hutton, not his personal assistant Peter Freestone, and certainly not his bandmates who were busy mixing their latest album, Innuendo, in London. Freddie had become a master at hiding his true condition. To the world, he was still the flamboyant, larger-than-life performer who could command any stage. But behind closed doors, he was fighting a battle that he knew he couldn't win. That evening, Freddie had dinner alone at his favorite restaurant in Montreux. The owner, Claude Nobbs, noticed something different about him. He ordered his usual Dover sole and champagne, but he barely touched the food. He kept staring out the window at Lake Geneva, as if he was memorizing the view. Nobbs remembered. When I asked if everything was all right, he just smiled and said, "Some things are too beautiful to last forever, darling." The waiter who served him that night noticed something even more peculiar. Freddie had pulled out a small notebook and was writing furiously throughout the meal, but everything changed at that exact moment when he started humming a melody nobody had ever heard before. After dinner, Freddie walked along the lakefront for an hour. Several residents spotted him sitting on various benches, always with that notebook, always writing. One elderly woman approached him thinking he might be lost or ill. He looked so frail, but when he smiled, it was like the sun breaking through clouds, she said. He told me he was writing love letters to the future. At 11 p.m., Freddie made his way to Mountain Studios. He had his own key. Queen practically owned the place by then. Security footage, which wasn't discovered until years later, shows him entering alone, carrying a small bag and what appeared to be handwritten notes. His usual confident stride was replaced by something more deliberate, more purposeful. Inside the studio, Freddie began setting up equipment that he'd learned to operate during their countless recording sessions. He'd always been hands-on, but tonight, he didn't want anyone else's fingerprints on what he was about to create. He positioned a single microphone in the center of the room, the same spot where he'd recorded Bohemian Rhapsody 16 years earlier. But Freddie's preparation went far beyond simple recording setup, and wait until you hear what happened next. He had brought with him a collection of items that would later prove crucial to understanding his mindset that night. Among them were photographs of his parents, his cats, and Queen performing at Live Aid. He arranged these carefully around the microphone stand, creating what he would later refer to on the tape as his circle of inspiration. The tape recorder was set to the highest quality setting. Freddie was meticulous about sound. Even in his final act, perfection mattered. He tested the levels multiple times, his voice weak, but still distinctly him. Testing, testing. This is Freddie. November 23rd, 1991. If you're hearing this, then the cosmic joke has reached its punchline, darlings. What happened next would haunt anyone who eventually heard those tapes. Freddie didn't just record a song. He recorded a complete audio diary. For 5.5 hours straight, from midnight until 5:30 a.m., He poured his soul into that microphone. He talked about his childhood in Zanzibar, his relationship with his parents, his fears about being forgotten, and most shocking of all, his regrets about not being more open about his sexuality when he had the chance to make a difference. The recording begins with Freddie's voice, notably weaker than his usual powerful tone, but still carrying that unmistakable theatrical flair. My darling ones, if you're listening to this, then I'm probably sipping champagne with David Bowie somewhere in the great beyond, and you're left picking up the pieces of my rather dramatic exit. Even in his darkest moment, Freddie couldn't resist a touch of humor. But what follows is perhaps the most heartbreaking 60 minutes of audio ever recorded by a major artist. He talks about watching his body betray him, about the nights when he could barely breathe, about the terror of losing his voice, the one thing that had defined his entire existence. I've spent my entire life performing, he continues on the tape, but I've never been more honest than I am right now, alone in this room where we created magic together. I need you to know that every song, every note, every moment on stage was real. The flamboyance, the costumes, the theatrics, that wasn't a performance. That was me trying to show you what love looks like when it's too big for one person to contain. Freddie then begins to reveal secrets that even his closest friends never knew. He talks about writing songs in his head during Queen's biggest concerts, melodies that came to him while performing We Will Rock You, or We Are the Champions. He describes having entire conversations with himself in different voices, working out harmonies that he would later teach the band without ever explaining where they came from. Brian thinks his guitar solos are spontaneous. Freddie chuckles weakly on the tape, but I've been humming most of them to him in the car for months before he discovers them. But you haven't seen anything yet. What he reveals next would change everything Queen fans thought they knew about their favorite songs. The most shocking revelation comes 90 minutes into the recording. Freddie begins to sing, not one of Queen's hits, but a completely unknown song that he'd apparently been working on in secret for over a decade. The lyrics are hauntingly prophetic, speaking about flying away on broken wings and leaving echoes in empty rooms. His voice, though weak, carries an emotional weight that surpasses even his greatest recorded performances. The song, which he calls Garden Lodge Goodbye, contains verses that seem to predict not just his own death, but also the future of Queen without him. He sings about 3 kings left to carry on the crown and music that outlives the man who made it. It's as if he could see into the future, knowing that Brian, Roger, and John would continue Queen's legacy long after he was gone. As Freddie sings, something extraordinary occurs that will leave you speechless. His voice, which had been weak and strained throughout the session, suddenly becomes stronger. For those 4 minutes and 4 seconds, the exact length of Love of My Life, his vocal power returns to something approaching his prime years. Sound engineers who later analyzed this section were baffled by the technical impossibility of what they were hearing. It's as if he channeled every remaining bit of his life force into that one song, Brian May would later write in his private journal. The frequency analysis shows vocal strength that shouldn't have been physically possible given his condition. Embedded within the song are musical phrases and melodies that Queen fans would later recognize in the band's posthumous releases. Freddie had been working on material for albums that wouldn't be released until the 2000s. He'd been planning Queen's future even as he prepared for his own end. "I've recorded enough vocal tracks to keep the boys busy for decades," he says during a break in the session. "Hidden in various studios, locked in safety deposit boxes, scattered like breadcrumbs for them to find when they're ready. My voice will never really leave you, darlings. I've made sure of that." But Freddie had planned something even more elaborate. Throughout the recording, he drops hints about what he calls his time capsule messages, recordings he'd made throughout the 1980s, knowing that his time was limited, preparing material for future Queen releases. At around 3 a.m., the recording takes an unexpected turn that you won't believe. Freddie's demeanor shifts, and he begins speaking directly to specific people, not just his bandmates, but fans, critics, and even future musicians who hadn't been born yet. He addresses the AIDS crisis with a political passion that few had ever heard from him publicly. "To everyone who will face this battle after me," he speaks into the microphone with surprising strength. "Know that your sexuality is not a death sentence. Your love is not a sin. Your difference is not a weakness. I couldn't say this while I was healthy because I was afraid of losing my career. But dying has a way of clarifying what really matters. What makes this recording session even more remarkable is the technical complexity of what Freddie accomplished alone. Sound engineers who later analyzed the tapes were amazed at the layering techniques he used. Despite his weakened condition, he managed to create a multi-track recording that rivals the production quality of Queen's studio albums. He overdubbed harmonies with himself, created vocal percussion, and even attempted to replicate Brian May's guitar sound using only his voice and some creative microphone techniques. At one point, he creates an entire choir using 24 different vocal tracks of himself, each recorded separately with subtle variations in pitch and timbre. The most technically impressive moment comes when Freddie recreates Queen's entire Bohemian Rhapsody arrangement using only his voice, and just when you thought it couldn't get more incredible, he begins layering operatic sections, rock vocals, and even mimics John Deacon's bass line with perfect pitch. At around 3:30 a.m., security footage shows an unexpected visitor attempting to enter the studio. It was Roger Taylor, who had driven from London on a whim, feeling something was wrong with Freddie. The drummer later described having a powerful intuition that led him to make the 8-hour drive through the night. But Freddie had anticipated this possibility. He'd programmed the studio's security system to deny entry to everyone, including Queen members, between midnight and 6 a.m. Roger spent an hour banging on the door, calling Freddie's name, but the soundproofing was too good. What Roger didn't know was that Freddie was aware of his presence. On the tape, you can hear Freddie pause and say, "Roger's outside. My heart wants to let him in, but my soul needs to finish this alone." This next part will break your heart. The audio reveals that Freddie spent 20 minutes just listening to Roger calling his name through the door, whispering, I'm sorry," over and over. During the 4th hour of recording, Freddie records detailed personal messages for each of his bandmates. But these aren't simple goodbye notes. They're comprehensive instructions for how Queen should continue without him, complete with musical arrangements, lyrical suggestions, and even marketing strategies. For Brian, keep reaching for the stars, darling. Your guitar is a rocket ship, and I'll be riding along on every note. I've written 17 songs specifically for your playing style. They're hidden in the piano bench at Garden Lodge. For Roger, keep the beat, keep the fire, keep the madness. You're the heartbeat of this circus. When you play We Will Rock You in the future, remember that every stomp represents my heartbeat continuing through you. For John, stay mysterious, stay true to yourself. Your bass lines are the foundation of our castle. I know you'll want to leave the music business after I'm gone. I understand. But before you do, there's a recording studio key taped under your car's dashboard. The most emotional moment comes when he records a message for Queen's fans. You gave a shy boy from Zanzibar the confidence to become a legend. You turned Farrokh Bulsara into Freddie Mercury, and for that, I will be eternally grateful. When you hear our music in the future, know that every note carries my love for you. But then he does something unprecedented that proves the biggest shock was still coming. He begins singing personal thank you messages to fans by name. People who had sent letters, attended multiple concerts, or created fan art that had reached him over the years. The last hour of Freddie's secret session is perhaps the most difficult to listen to. His voice becomes increasingly strained, and there are long pauses where you can hear him struggling to breathe. But he refuses to stop. He's determined to finish what he started. During this final hour, he creates what he calls his musical will, a document that outlines exactly how Queen's catalog should be handled after his death. But most remarkably, he begins composing a new song in real time, creating both lyrics and melody as the tape rolls. The Show Must Go On, which wouldn't be completed until months later, can be heard taking shape in this final hour. And then came the moment that changed everything when Freddie worked out chord progressions and vocal arrangements that would later become the song's defining characteristics. The tapes remained hidden for 6 months. It wasn't until Jim Hutton was cleaning out Freddie's personal effects that he discovered a safety deposit box key with a note for when the circus has left town. Inside the box were not just the recordings, but detailed instructions on when and how they should be released, if ever. Brian May was the first to hear the complete session. His reaction was captured in a diary entry dated June 15, 1992. Today I heard Freddie's voice again. and it broke my heart in ways I didn't know were possible. He planned this. All of it. Even his death was a performance, carefully orchestrated to minimize our pain and maximize his artistic legacy. At the very end of the tape, after 5.5 hours of confessions, music, and goodbyes, there's a moment of silence. Then, in a voice stronger than he'd managed all night, Freddie delivers one last message. And remember, darlings, I am exactly the person I wanted to be. The show must go on. The recording equipment shuts off at exactly 5:24 a.m., May 24th being Freddie's 45th birthday, still 6 months in the future. But the most shocking discovery came years later when sound engineers found an embedded digital signature within the audio frequencies of the final message, a technique that wouldn't be commercially available until 1995. Today, that secret session remains one of music's greatest mysteries. Freddie Mercury spent his final healthy moments doing what he'd always done, creating music, pushing boundaries, and ensuring that his voice would echo through eternity. That November night in Montreux wasn't just a recording session. It was a masterclass in how to say goodbye with grace, dignity, and just a touch of the dramatic flair that made Freddie Mercury immortal. That's the incredible true story of Freddie Mercury's final secret recording session. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of music's greatest mysteries, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Mercury Moments family for more untold stories about the legendary Queen frontman. Give this video a thumbs up if it moved you, and let us know in the comments which Queen mystery you'd like us to explore next. Until next time, remember, the show must go on.